You've just managed to kill your lane opponent at level 1. You crash the wave into their tower and base. This will let you keep playing aggressively once you come back to lane, since the lane will be freezing towards you. Notice that your support didn't base. You look at what they're up to back there. Seraphine has decided to stay in lane to try and ruin the freeze he just created. How nice. At Skillcapped, we often spend all day talking about how to punish low elo mistakes, as well as learning how to deal with the kind of support you just saw. Our argument for why you shouldn't mind these kinds of players is that solo queue is kinda like a scale. The lower elo you are, the worse your teammates are, but it's always balanced out by how bad your opponents are at the same time. However, the real trick to tipping the scales in your favor is to learn the best way of carrying solo queue, which is to force enemy mistakes. Understanding what you should be doing and recognizing enemy mistakes is how you climb. But forcing your opponents to commit even more mistakes than your own team is making is how you really take over games. And there's no one who understands mistakes quite like our resident challenger, Hector. For this week's guide, we've sent him to Smurf Q, and he's found himself in 3 absurd situations. One game, he's completely standing still in front of an Alistair, tanking a ton of free damage. The next, he's paired with a literal bot as a support. It may as well be one of our typical challenges where he has to navigate an unwinnable lane. And the troll supports don't stop there. In the third replay we'll look at, you'll see a completely AFK Lulu in the middle of the lane that he desperately has to defend. These are some classic solo queue situations that you may have found yourself in as well. But you'll see how he navigates himself out of each and every one of these problems by making his own team's plays look good compared to what he makes his opponents do. And just to add a bit more to that previous point, this is what we constantly teach and cover on our vast set of courses over at Skillcapped. The game needs to be played completely differently in your ELO compared to what you see in pro play and high ELO streams. We teach you the right way to climb from the low ELO perspective. If you want to climb quickly and learn how to deal with bad teammates, then check us out after this. In fact, we're so confident in our teaching methods that we have a money-back guarantee on our service, which no other coaching platform would dare to provide. Anyway, let's begin with that Lucian example. The start of this game begins with Hector and his support Neela leashing for their jungler. Ah yes, we forgot to mention, the support in this game is also a troll like the other two. Smurf Q sure is a great addition to the game. While they leashed, due to the ward placed in lane, we can see the enemy bot setting up in the brushes, trying to cheese some early damage once Hector gets there. Now, the correct way of approaching the situation is to make use of the fact that their opponents didn't sweep the brush. This means that Tristana doesn't know she's spotted at the moment. What you'd ideally do as a double range duo is to approach as Hector is from here. This way you can both hit Tristana for free while the enemy Alistair in this brush is effectively useless. It's a guaranteed winning trade. But this Neela's eyesight could use a bit of help, since she somehow missed the Alistair that walked into this brush earlier. She ends up face-checking him. This unlosable situation goes from a win to a 1-for-1 trade, though to be fair, it's hard to be upset with this end result. And we've arrived at the moment we previewed at the start, but it was actually a bit misleading. What Hector's about to do is actually on purpose. It may look like his typical gameplay, but trust us, he's actually got a good motive this time. What do you think he's up to by doing this? Looking at the end result of his actions, it becomes clear what he was trying to achieve. The wave is pushing incredibly hard towards him. You can see the massive difference in how the wave looks. Don't get us wrong, this is an extremely niche situation, but making decisions like these in your games is often just combining simple concepts together and realizing how to exploit the fact that your opponents don't know any better. For starters, in another lane like top or mid, the winner in a trade kill situation is always whoever has the wave pushing toward them. The whole point is that as you're both dead, that one person comes back to a massive wave to farm and the other doesn't. There's a clear winner, right? But in bot, trading a single kill on both sides will obviously leave 2 players left in the lane. Typically having the ADC stay alive is winning since they can keep farming. However, this was actually an odd situation to be left in. Yes, Hector lived and Tristana died, but the wave is dead even. If Hector recalled to spend his gold, then he'd miss a ton of farm and experience since the waves are even and the creeps would keep dying rapidly while he left. There's also no way he can push the wave into the tower before Tristana is back this early into the game, especially with a full health Alistair here. And if he just stays in lane and last hits, then Tristana will come back with an item advantage. Sure, she'll be a bit behind in EXP, but it's not like Hector is happy about that. So it's not that he's in a bad spot, but he's not as ahead as he'd like to be is the point that we're getting at. Understanding this, he makes use of the thing every ADC complains about. If your own supports don't understand how to help you manage your waves, then you can be damn sure the enemy support has no idea what they're doing either. He basically gives a knowledge check to this Alistar, and we're going to be honest, almost every single support below Challenger will likely fail to a play like this. By letting Alistar auto-attack and Q him, he's making sure that the enemy wave will overpower his own, since the blue minions will attack Alistar while the red creeps will keep killing his own wave. And the reason he goes back in is because he's not satisfied by how much he pushed it this way. For good measure, he baits Alistar into pushing even harder, making sure Tristana misses a ton of creeps in the process. Take a look at the end result. Tristana barely reaches level 2 after clearing this minion. On the other hand, Hector is an entire level ahead after clearing the rest of this wave. Sure, he's a bit low, but with the wave in a good position and some sustain, this is completely fine and a winning position. Looking back, this is the main point we want to get at in this guide. Knowing what is ideal for you and bad for your opponent are good skills to work on. But understanding that your opponents are either clueless or autopiloting, and learning how to lead them to the wrong choice can help you achieve even better results in your games. Moving on to our second replay. Just like we mentioned, let's take a look at this robot playing Janna. To prove that she's not just a bad player, let's take a look at her gameplay. While they leashed, they kind of just stood there doing nothing. She often just AFKs, and after a bit, randomly begins following where Miss Fortune is going. It didn't take much time for Hector to realize that he's dealing with a literal bot as a support, which, as we all know, is obviously a blessing in disguise. That's the best partner you're ever going to get in low elo. At least this Janna won't int like a typical support, right? Jokes aside, as you can see, the Janna is doing literally nothing in every fight. It's very clear that this isn't a real player. Sadly, this means that Hector had to play very safe and passively, since he can't 1v2 the lane, especially versus a Kalista and a Karthus support who can be quite aggressive. This would be a problem in high elo, but as you can see, Hector will come out of this lane completely even on EXP and farm, and even scores a kill after a while with the help of his jungler. Here's all you have to know to get through this laning phase. Think about Kalista and Karthus as champions. They're both high DPS, short-ranged characters who want an extended fight to make use of their kits, right? So if you were playing that duo into Hector, which wave tactic would you use the most often to punish him? Fast pushing, freezing, or slow pushing? Well, fast pushing does nothing. Both Kalista and Karthus are mediocre at pressuring under tower. Crashing small waves would give almost zero advantage to them. Slow pushing has similar problems. They both require a bit of time to ramp up their damage and don't dive very well. While slow pushing could allow them to rotate around the map or take base timings, it doesn't do much to punish Miss Fortune here, which means that they would be trying to freeze the wave and force MF out of the safety of the tower. With their superior early combo, they could win trades even at a slight wave deficit and force him to take a bad base. This could work very well even if the Janna wasn't an AFK bot. Okay, now that you know what they should do, then you just need to figure out if there's any weaknesses to that strategy. In low elo, there's one easy and big flaw you can exploit there. As you can probably imagine, that requires a lot of discipline and patience to pull off. Kalista has to crash a wave at Miss Fortune's tower, then it has to bounce back, then she has to hold a freeze for an extended period of time to zone Miss Fortune. That is a super long process, and very boring to do. Not only that, but Karthus has to be on the same page too. So all you have to do, like Hector does, is to stand really far back. Don't get us wrong, this is boring too, but it's how you'll win these types of lanes. If you interact with your opponent as little as possible, then they're going to get bored. After all, it's a video game and people want to have fun. If they can't interact with you, then they're probably going to autopilot hit the wave just for something to do. This is all Hector has to do for his opponents to push the wave quickly into him throughout the entire lane phase. Just stand far back and they'll do the rest. It was that easy. Not only that, but he'd sometimes bait Karthus into hitting the wave too. See how he walks around his own casters when walking up? This is to bait Karthus to use Q to try and harass, while at the same time pushing the wave. This tip is especially useful versus mage supports like Xerath, Brand, Lux, etc. Baiting them to use their main AoE spells on you in the wave will push the wave faster into you, just like in this game. Anyway, yeah, that's literally it. He just played safe and his opponents just kept crashing waves at his tower. Having an AFK robot as the support literally did not hurt him in the slightest. Eventually, he scaled up and anytime Shyvana comes for a gank, he's able to pick up a kill here and there. Just like any actual challenge video we would have done, he got through this lane easily, abusing low elo player tendencies. Moving on to our third and final replay, it's the AFK Lulu. From the start of the game and multiple times throughout, the Lulu was apparently lagging very badly. Versus a Draven Seraphine duo and a level 6 Fiddlesticks, this proved to be quite a problem. It wasn't so simple to get through this lane phase like the game before. Even better, like we previewed at the start of the guide, the Lulu would sometimes walk into lane and AFK in the middle of it. This prompted Hector to try and defend her, often to no avail. Sadly, this was all a bit too much for him to deal with, and the lane does not end very well. If you're a regular to our content, then this game should resemble plenty of guides we've made about Hector having a bad lane phase and then bringing it back later into the game. For those new to his typical behavior when behind, it's really simple. If he thinks he'll be useless in teamfights, then he just sits in a side lane and farms until he's strong. Even if his teammates are all dying on the other side of the map, it doesn't matter. Just farm and get items until you're relevant again. This isn't what we'll be focusing on in this guide, we just want to give you some context of what led to the following series of events. We've covered that in plenty of guides before, and to no surprise, eventually he's strong enough to where he and his teammates are the ones getting the Baron buff for themselves and taking control of the game. But this comeback isn't what we'll cover in this replay, it's what happens next. Unfortunately, because they were behind the whole game, the enemy is already on soul point. Although the game's momentum has shifted, the Infernal Soul could spell disaster for his chances of winning, as it's an incredibly powerful buff if his opponents get their hands on it. Now, as a self-proclaimed macro genius, here's how Hector planned to make sure the enemy team couldn't get their hands on it. As it's spawning soon, all he and his teammates have to do is push lanes out with Baron. That's exactly what Hector is doing here in bottom. He's pushing out the lane to pressure. After pushing, he begins collapsing with his team towards the river and presses tab. 50 seconds left till the dragon spawns. Now the enemy Draven may be top, as you can see, but Hector has absolutely zero faith in his teammates at the moment, especially his Lulu. She could lag out at any minute again. What's happening on the map that you can see at the moment which might be the cause of Hector's lack of trust? We just talked about this, right? Why is no one on the mid wave? If just one of his teammates was pressuring with a Baron wave, then the enemy team would be forced to defend their mid lane towers. Instead, they're being allowed to prepare for the fight and contest vision around Dragon. If you already don't trust your team, then you definitely want to avoid flipping the game on a 50-50 Dragon fight. So Hector instead makes use of the fact that his opponent's macro is just as bad and immediately books it towards bottom. Now, we could sit here and break down every possible outcome of this play and really analyze whether this is a good or bad decision on his part. However, we don't have to. His opponents have so many options to consider, like sending just one to defend the push, going down mid themselves, sacrificing the bot lane inhibitor for the Dragon Soul, all of them collapsing to kill him, etc. And all those decisions have so many other variables to consider as well. Better yet, they have to make that choice in like 5 seconds or they probably lose the game. And even if someone on the enemy team knows the right play, they all have to be on the same page, otherwise this is going to be a disaster. So it's not like Hector himself knows exactly what's about to happen by doing this. He just knows that his opponents are going to lose the game trying to respond to this pressure play. Take a look. Cho'Gath is pushing mid alone, trying to counter pressure. Doesn't really accomplish anything. Fiddle and Seraphine are confused too. They kind of want to go towards bottom now, but they're just being cut off by some of Hector's team. Better yet, take a look at Fiddlesticks desperately trying to stop this bot lane push alone. Despite Hector's very questionable mechanics, he ends up disposing of the poor Scarecrow. Everything is falling apart for the enemy team, so now Cho'Gath is here to save his base. Unfortunately for him, Hector already has a gateway scheme and runs through the enemy base. As he does this, take a look at how his team will secure the dragon completely uncontested now. All the while, Hector keeps wasting Cho'Gath's time, takes the Gromp for good measure, and eventually even settles in top to keep farming more waves. Like we said, it's not that Hector had this entire sequence of events planned out. Of course not. The whole point is that something was sure to go wrong for this low elo enemy team the second they saw him pressuring bottom. Hector knows that they don't have the skill or experience to react to a play like this, and you should be certain of that too in your own games. This is a play that even challenger lobbies might struggle to react to properly. To recap, learning what the correct play you should be doing at all times is important. If you're always doing the right thing, then you'll obviously climb ELO. But being able to recognize enemy mistakes, and better yet, leading them into making big errors, is how you can really climb. Try baiting your opponents into weird situations more often and see what kind of results you get. Alright guys, before we wrap this up, let's tell you a little more about Skill Capped. So, we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee and think that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that, right? Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really does work. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium league guides on the internet. We add over 20 videos a week, with over 1,600 guides curated into over 100 courses no one can compare. We've also sent challenger players into ELO Hell 714 times and counting, where they commentate how to carry live. They also respond to all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. Anyway, that's it for this guide. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.